The woman changes into her pajamas, tempting her husband who was a military veteran, but he stands still. The woman angrily lies back in bed to sleep. Suddenly, someone pulls off her blanket. Immediately after, thick fog fills the bedroom. The woman wakes up from her dream, and her husband is nowhere to be seen. She tries to get out of bed to look for him, but steps on broken glass shards. The woman wakes up screaming. She realizes it was just a dream. Her husband is lying next to her, staring at her. 2 years of military service in Afghanistan changed this man, turned him into a devil-like person. What exactly happened to this man? 2 years ago, Rick married his wife Kate, but he had to go to Afghanistan for service. During a late-night operation, they were attacked by a mysterious unit. They chased them into a cave. Rick took the lead and went into the cave to investigate. The stone wall is covered in mysterious patterns. Just as Rick is studying them intently, a dark figure suddenly appears. Rick shoots and kills it. He approaches to confirm the body. A malevolent spirit emerges from it. It completely possesses Rick's body. On the other side, Kate at home. She and Rick's father are waiting. 2 years have passed, but they haven't received any news from Rick. Kate is very worried that her husband might be dead. That evening, she receives a phone call. Her husband is being sent back to the United States. Kate feels uneasy. She's afraid Rick might be missing limbs, but the fact that he's coming home means he's still alive. The next day, Veterans Affairs Hospital send a psychologist to explain the situation first. Rick is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. His family needs to support him in his treatment. The doctor advises Rick's father and Kate to prepare themselves mentally. Tomorrow, the hospital will send Rick back. That evening, Rick quietly returns home. Kate is very excited, but she quickly realizes something is wrong, because her husband isn't speaking. He doesn't have the joy of coming home. Kate is afraid her husband's condition will worsen, so she takes him back to the Veterans Affairs Hospital, seeking help from a psychologist. On their way to the hospital, they see a newly built mosque nearby. Rick's father says, "This place doesn't feel like America anymore." Kate tells her father-in-law not to say such things. Shortly after, the three of them arrive at the hospital. After a brief conversation with Rick, the doctor assures Kate not to worry. You can bring Rick for checkups every 2 days, until he fully recovers. The doctor doesn't find it troublesome at all, since her own father had PTSD. Unfortunately, he wasn't treated in time. When the doctor was 7 years old, her father died by suicide. That's why she pursued psychology. Kate follows the doctor's advice, and takes her husband back home. Inside the mosque, Max is the imam of this mosque. He aspires for tranquility and peace, but his son, York, got into a fight with a white leftist player from the school team. Because his classmates discriminated against his race, they mocked York, saying his whole family are terrorists, should be dragged into the woods and executed. Although York was born in the United States, he can't find a sense of belonging in this place. That's why he rebels. But his father doesn't understand York, and condemns him for using violence to solve problems. Every conversation between father and son ends up in an argument. In an effort to bond with Rick, she wears a new set of pajamas, but Rick remains unusually indifferent. Ignoring his wife's panic, he goes downstairs to make breakfast. He chops the meat expressionlessly. Rick's father rushes over to check, and discovers his son has cut his own hand. He pulls Rick aside to tend to the wound, and tries to talk to his son. Unexpectedly, Rick suddenly erupts, and pins his father to the table. If Kate hadn't come in time to stop it, it might have caused a big disaster. Kate doesn't know what to do, so she can only take Rick to the hospital. A psychologist has just developed a mask therapy for patients with similar conditions. Sitting together wearing masks, they share pain with each other. Underneath the masks, everyone can be honest. Rick's father feels this method won't work. However, Rick, facing a group of masked individuals, actually starts to speak up. He talks about his experiences in Afghanistan. A terrorist covered with explosives charged into the convoy. His comrades were blown to pieces in front of him. Numerous civilians were affected by the explosion. People died every day. Rick being able to talk about these things is definitely a huge progress. The doctor gives him a white mask for Rick to draw on, but Rick stares at the mask and recalls the incident in the cave. The person Rick shot in the confusion that day was just an underage child. He looked at the other person's face, feeling despair in his heart. Suddenly, the boy's eyes turned red. The brief flashback ends. Under the influence of the evil spirit, Rick burns the mask given by the doctor. Perhaps the daytime therapy made the evil spirit feel threatened, so it approaches Kate voluntarily at night. But Kate quickly realizes that her husband wants to wear a mask. The white mask has been burned black by fire. It looks very eerie. The next day, Rick wears a mask. He breaks into the mosque where Max is. He interrupts the prayers of the worshippers, and gets into a physical altercation with them. Max comes and pulls Rick away, and takes him to the office for a conversation. Max asks Rick about his purpose for being there, but Rick speaks incoherently. He points to a map behind him and says, "I am the smokeless fire. I'm going to a place called Calecott." Max finds this person strange, so he calls the police to handle it. Kate receives the news, and rushes to the scene. She explains, Rick suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, which explains his impulsive actions. The police don't give Rick a hard time. He agrees to let Kate take him away, but Max is concerned about what Rick said. He feels there's a disturbing energy emanating from this young man, so he asks Kate, what happened with Rick in Calecott? Unfortunately, Kate doesn't know much about her husband's 2-year service. In the evening, she talks to Rick about Calecott, but unexpectedly, it angers Rick. He grabs Kate by the throat, lifting her off the ground. Fortunately, Rick didn't actually kill her, but he frequently exhibits aggressive behavior, which is not a good thing. Kate leaves Rick at the hospital to receive treatment for a period of time. After taking care of her husband, Kate seeks help from Max. She believes this imam might guide her husband back to himself. On the other side, Rick is at the hospital. He encounters a shutterbugs. The person is very enthusiastic, and shows the other party his own camera. Rick is stimulated by the camera flash, and wants to push the photographer down the stairs. He takes off his mask, revealing his eyes emitting red light. These cannot be human eyes. The photographer is scared and turns to run. The lights in the stairwell suddenly go out. He steps on nothing, and tumbles down the stairs. The photographer quickly takes out his camera to document, while Rick chases after him and grabs him. When the two return to the lobby, the photographer's behavior becomes strange. It looks as if he is controlled by Rick. Kate took her husband to see Max, when she realized there was no improvement in his condition. During this meeting, the evil spirit no longer disguised itself, and revealed Max's tragic childhood experiences. It then warned him to stay away from Rick, or else it would possess his body. Kate, who was standing nearby, tried to stop her husband, but the evil spirit told her that her husband's body belonged to it. After the evil spirit finished speaking, it put on its mask and left, causing all the flowers around to wither and die. This evil spirit was too powerful. Max immediately prepared for an exorcism ritual. He returned to his office to gather information, but the bookshelf behind him shook violently, and numerous rats emerged from the top. Max sought the help of an expert in pest control to deal with the rats and clean up the office. As they were about to move the bookshelf to inspect it, they discovered a strange array drawn on the back, resembling some kind of malevolent deity. The pest control expert was affected, with his eyes turning red, and he nearly set the office on fire. Fortunately, Max arrived in time to awaken the expert's senses. Meanwhile, the hospital was in chaos, as Rick took control of all the patients. A psychiatrist attempted to calm him down, and Rick gradually regained his composure. However, the psychiatrist suddenly started to bleed from the nose. In the evening, following her routine ward rounds, the psychiatrist noticed a patient was missing, and all the bedding was suspended in midair. Before the psychiatrist could react, she was kicked away by Rick. The psychiatrist wanted to recheck the other wards, and found the same array under a bed. Then, a photographer holding a firearm appeared, and aimed the gun at the psychiatrist's temple. In a critical moment, the handgun jammed unexpectedly, giving the psychiatrist a chance to pull off the photographer's mask, and attempt to guide him back to sanity. The photographer's will wavered, but the evil spirit controlled him to commit suicide. On the other side, Max saw off the pest control expert, but failed to drive away the evil spirit. The evil spirit possessed York instead. Max tied up his son on the bed, and then informed Kate about the situation on his side. They all gathered at the psychiatrist's office, where the psychiatrist took out the photographer's camera. Inside, they found footage of Rick going insane, confirming that all the people going mad were being controlled by the evil spirit. The psychiatrist led everyone to the restaurant, where all the tables and chairs were floating in midair, and Rick stood in the shadows manipulating everything. Kate went out to distract Rick's attention, while the psychiatrist administered a sedative injection to Rick, unsure of how long its effects would last. Everyone carried Rick to the mosque, where Max pleaded with the believers to guard the front door. Max then took a flower and placed it under Rick's nose. Rick regained consciousness upon smelling the scent, and Kate and Rick's father held him down. While Max recited prayers, the psychiatrist wanted to fetch tools from the car. The evil spirit took control of the hospital patients, making them drive towards the mosque. The car collided with the motorcycle fuel tank, causing a massive explosion. The patients wearing masks poured out of the carriage and clashed with the believers guarding the entrance of the mosque. Rick also broke free from the restraints due to a sudden inducement, and he shook off the three individuals and hid in the shadows. Kate hurriedly chased after him. On the other side, the psychiatrist broke free from the crowd and escaped back into the mosque, but the people in the hall were nowhere to be found. The walls of the building were covered in mysterious symbols. Rick suddenly appeared at the end of the corridor and teleported behind the psychiatrist, pushing her against the wall. The psychiatrist was about to be killed, but Max stunned Rick by hitting him with a fire extinguisher. The group carried him back to the hall and resumed the exorcism ritual. As the mysterious pattern spread rapidly throughout the building, Rick's mask started to glow, and the patients outside became increasingly frenzied, even throwing Molotov cocktails into the mosque. Max poured holy water into Rick's mouth, causing him to go into a frenzy and attack the people around him. Kate summoned the courage to hold back the raging Rick, to ensure that Max was not hindered, but Max's prayers still couldn't suppress the evil spirit. Rick stepped on Kate's palm and snapped Max's wrist. In the end, it was Kate who successfully used words to bring her husband back to his senses. She took the opportunity to remove Rick's mask and threw it into the bonfire. Flames can purify all impurities. The evil spirit left Rick's body. Perhaps it will return to Afghanistan, back to its birthplace, and wait for the next wave of war to strike, before seizing another opportunity. As long as the war doesn't end, the evil spirit won't disappear. Fortunately, Rick was indeed saved, and York, who was tied up at home, returned to normal. The patients who were going crazy outside, with puzzled expressions, took off their masks and regained their sanity. Afterward, the police arrived at the scene to clean up the aftermath. Kate's family prepared to leave, and as the psychiatrist glanced at the mask before leaving, she became the next host. The film ends here. Having seen many Christian exorcisms, it was the first time witnessing an Islamic exorcism. However, Max didn't contribute much, and it was still the female protagonist who awakened her husband. It feels like the film didn't provide a clear introduction to the origin of the evil spirit. If its identity could be expanded upon, it would surely enhance the plot. Although it is a horror film about evil spirits, its essence is to promote peace and anti-war sentiments, leaving a deep impact on the viewers. If you enjoyed my video, please give me a subscription.